We decided to talk about Donald Trump, Netanyahu, and Erika Kirk. We all have two faces to who we really are.
Very independent, big ears, moon face, nurture, care.
Kind of good to know thyself.
Personality comes from persona, which is the Latin word for mask. So it's the mask that we put on in order to adapt to our life.
If you're on his good side, he might love you to death. And if you're on his bad side, he might want to kill you.
Be cautious with the plastic surgery, with the facial adjustment, because you're changing a lot more than just, how you look on your Instagram. You're changing your whole self.
The power of the face in our lives.
Lunatic Astrology.
Hello, everyone. In today's video, we're talking about your face, and that is a part of your astrology chart. You call it your rising sign or your ascendant. We're going to look a little bit deeper than just how the astrology shows your facial appearance in your chart, but we're also going to have a wonderful interview here today with Taylor Northcutt, who is a face reader. And in today's video, we're going to analyze the faces of some very public people, Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump, and JD Vance. Well, at the very same time, we're going to peek into how this operates in our lives as a public face and a private face. We all have two faces to who we really are. And it's quite exciting to also learn something that I didn't really understand, but that if your face reflects who you really are and you change your face, might that actually change your destiny? Because once you see that possibility, you can't unsee it. For those of us who are into facial Botox or rejuvenation or major plastic surgery, there's a bit of a warning here. By the way, that's not me. This is the original version. So welcome to this amazing interview with Taylor Northcutt. His YouTube channel, ProSopa, is in my description box below, as well as links to his website if you want to get your own face read. So let's get going and have an amazing interview about the intersection between astrology, the rising sign, and the facial appearance. We'll use some famous people's charts for examples, or their faces for examples. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. It was so much fun to learn about the power of the face in our lives. So grateful and excited to have Taylor on our show today, a physiognomist, somebody who reads the science of faces, what it means both phenotypically from your racial backgrounds all the way through to the little perks of our face, even the ways our face change over time. And we can be one way and then another later in life, which I think is fascinating. And we're going to talk about some famous people under this facial reading technique. So welcome so much, Taylor, to our show today. Can you tell everybody a bit about your own path in life and how you got here into such an exotic, traditional face reading mode? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad to be on, and I first picked up on this in the Middle East. I actually studied Arabic in college, and I studied abroad in Jordan and in Morocco. And over there in the Middle East, they have the Arab Islamic tradition of face reading, which is known as Al-Firosa, which has a lot to do with discerning mental health characteristics, trustworthy versus untrustworthy, various other things. And so I heard that mentioned kind of culturally over there, and it piqued an interest, and I started reading up on it online. I found some English language and French language sources on a school of thought known as Morphopsychology, which is the technical term for what I practice. That's the one that has the 4 temperaments and the planetary face shapes and a few of the other details. Left side, right side is in there, but is also pretty universal. You find it in Chinese face reading as well. And that was in 2021, and I've just been kind of going at it ever since. First as a hobby, just something to do for fun, do on friends and family. But then over time, as I got deeper into research and started kind of putting stuff about it online, people got really interested. And now I'm doing it full time in my YouTube channel.
Yeah, and your YouTube channel, ProSopa, is quite fun to watch. It's like really, you can binge it like Netflix once you get going. They're all like very precise, fun, short videos. I'm even just wondering, before we talk about some of the famous people today, Erika, Kirk, and Netanyahu and Donald Trump, major players in our world stage. I'm wondering, as you learned this tool and dove into it and you followed your curiosity and stuff, what is that, a Mercury face on you? As you followed your curiosity, did you eventually find it was at first like, oh my God, I understand my mom, my dad, my siblings? Like, was it useful in some personal way to you?
Yes, absolutely. So it's helped me understand people in my life. So, for example, my brother, Mars face, short upturned nose, he is pugnacious. He is, it's tied into your thing, he's an Aries. just like my daughter, and they're both very feisty, pugnacious, Mars-faced little people. My wife, moon face, so strong need for nurture, care, rhythmic sort of moods. But even for myself, my own facial asymmetry, revealing how I sort of show myself to the world in a different way than I really am deep down, and showing, maybe growth areas like I'm very stubborn, runs in the family, I'm very independent, big ears. And so, sort of being able to recognize those, seeing, okay, those are my tendencies. If I have troubles in a certain area, maybe it's coming from that, and being able to work on myself from there.
Yeah, it's kind of good to know thyself, right? A good old
Hmm.
Oracle of Delphi inscription. And, I find that even for me years ago, I was in California and I went to see a Chinese face reader. She was quite famous. She wrote a book. She's well known. I can't remember her name. I think she might still be alive. We're talking about 30 years ago. And she looked at my face and told me things about myself in a like 8 minute mini reading after the end of her presentation that she shouldn't have known, about my life, my temperaments, my past, my relationships to people and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, like this is insane. And it works very well. Okay, and I'm intrigued to talk about three people today that we decided to talk about: Donald Trump, Netanyahu, and Erika Kirk. And I really want to start with Donald Trump because we're recording on March the 21st, and as we know, there is a big war going on that the United States has got itself enmeshed in, and the rest of the world doesn't want to participate in Iran. And given that this is the person kind of running what could be World War III in an onset of World War III, I think it'd be interesting to talk about that. And when I was listening to your video twice actually on him, one of the things that really stood out for me, a lot of what stood out for me was his asymmetry, because you talked about him being very having this face, first of all, that was choleric, and then a sanguine forehead for a restless, impatient intellect, but hardworking and driven from his like choleric face.
Hmm.
I got all of that. But two things really surprised me in your presentation. What surprised me was that he had in the beginning of his life what you called a Venus face, which you
Hmm.
actually said art of the deal and peacemaking, but then it morphed into Mars. So I want to ask you about that. And then I want to ask about the left and right side. So, because there's such a difference between who he is in the face forward in the world and who he is privately. So, how do we change from a Venus face and just describe the shape of a Venus face to a Mars face? How do people do that? I mean, aren't you born with a face, just like a handprint and a fingerprint?
Yeah. Well, the traditional answer in morphopsychology is, and this is why I sort of section off my videos in temperament, face shape, facial features. I think of it sort of like a pyramid. The lower you go, the more long-lasting and kind of basic a trait is, and then you go up and you build up more finer details. Think like a painting. You've got the canvas, you got the broad strokes, you've got the little details as well. The broad strokes of the personality, that's the temperament. That's inborn, and in morphopsychology, which comes mostly out of France, they say that it's pretty much unchanging. So that's what we're born with. And then we take on a certain face shape as our personality. Personality comes from persona, which is the Latin word for mask. So it's the mask that we put on in order to adapt to our life. So with Donald Trump, you can see that initially he did have very much a Venus face, which they call it a lozenge shape. I call it more of a diamond or a heart-shaped face. You can think of someone like Leonardo DiCaprio, maybe Taylor Swift or Emma Stone for female examples. Those are all classic Venus face people, each maybe with some kind of secondary elements there, but mostly Venusian. And that is a face that's very well adapted for deal making, for peacemaking, for stuff having to do with aesthetics and beauty, romance, relationships. But something you see a lot with people over time is as their circumstances in life change, as they get new experiences, those experiences are etched onto their face, sometimes literally in the form of various creases and wrinkles, which are actually signs of experience and are kind of a high quality mark in a lot of schools of face reading. But the face shape itself will change. The traditional French answer is that it changes about once every 7 years or so. And the Martian,
Wow.
yeah,
Really? That's a 7 year cycle. That's Saturnian. That's Saturn, Lord of Time and Karma. Oh, cool. Yeah.
fascinating, yeah. But that's the traditional answer they say there. And the Martian transformation is actually quite common because as people get older, their faces tend to sag a little bit more and they get a little more square, a little more Martian. And you'll notice that as people age, they get a little more crotchety, a little more combative. They get tired of dealing with people's BS, and so they become a little more aggressive. And so I think a combination of that combined with maybe some business stresses sort of pushed Donald Trump to assume that more Martian persona. And I think it really is a persona, and that's reinforced by the asymmetry. We see that the right side of his face, which he always wants to show off to the camera, is much broader, the jaw is stronger, the inner face, the features are smaller relative to the size of the head as a whole. The eye is much steelier and narrower in the gaze. It's a very determined face. If you just sort of, cover up one side of him while you're looking at him, you see, or make a composite like I do, you see this very strong, aggressive look. But then you look at his left side, which stands for his true inner private self, and that's a bit more Venusian, and it's very sensitive. And you can even tell a lot from just the expressions, the look in the eye on different sides. His left side, I see fear in there, honestly.
That's what you said, which shocked me. So I'm going to show that picture. It's a very like
Mhm.
it's a tiny screen grab. I don't know if I'll get it any bigger because I was on my iPhone. We'll see what we can do with that. But you're saying, because this is important for me to understand, like you're saying that the face has a basic canvas, and that will be one of our temperaments. You mean like some sanguine, choleric, phlegmatic, and what's the fourth basic?
Melancholic.
Melancholic. Okay. So those are the ancient Greek ways of seeing people's, world.
Mhm.
Okay. Health, used for health, I believe. There's a name for that. But anyway, so we have this basic, hardcore template. And when we're born in astrology, the rising sign is the actual mask. It's your avatar. If you're going to play a video game, you want to choose certain characteristics of the character you're going to play in the video game, right? So you're looking at the ascendant as that character you choose to play as a soul, which is your spirit, which is your sun. So we have this tendency for the mask or the character to look sometimes cartoonishly like you're going to laugh. In astrology, we can often say Cancer risings can have big round moon faces, but also
Mhm.
you'll find that like people who are Leo, right, the lion, they'll tend to have a hair fixation, like Leo rising, not necessarily sun. Well, I mean, you'll see it like with Donald Trump's hair, he's a Leo rising, or JD Vance's beard, or Erika Kirk's hair. These are Leo rising people, and you'll notice that they actually become like cartoonishly, the character of the lion. All right, so number one for my audience, we're not, although the basic canvas behind the face, the melancholic or the phlegmatic, more or less stays the same. There's this sort of mutation that can happen through life experience where we adopt a new facial characteristic, like from the Jupiter, the moon face, the Venus face, the Mars face, right? All right. So I have a question before I show you the Donald Trump picture because I know you said he is a scared man in 2016's presidential photo on the right side, and he's a scared man again on his 2025. You said stressed and scared and tired. Is that what I remember you saying?
Mhm.
Okay, and that's not his outer persona. And when you composite the right side, that's your hidden self. The right side, your more true self, or the left side. The left side. I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah, it's your left. It's the person's left-hand side is their inner self, and then their right-hand side is their outer persona.
Okay. Okay. So his outer persona is that tough guy, and his inner self looks to you scared. And I'll try to show the picture. But I
Mhm.
was going to ask a question too, just for general purposes. In our culture, where you're saying, well, aging can bring us into more Martian faces, more square, longer, broad, like this way, and that we could like a rectangle, I guess, and then we could end up with a kind of crotchety or grumpy or more, what do you call it? Like, grumpy old men and women disposition or combative fighter, warrior. But my question is that in our culture, everyone wants to get snatched.
Mhm.
So does it mean that when we change our face that we change our destiny, or is it because people are doing so much surgery, lip fillers and jaw snatching, and what happens to this idea of the face is the emblematic representation of one's this character that we play?
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the surprising things when you look into face reading from various different traditions. As I've learned more about it, I find that this is actually a very common idea in both East and West, that actually it's a two-way street. And so if the face is altered intrusively through surgery or something else, then the personality will actually change to match. The action mechanism here is a bit obscure. It could be subconscious, psychological, like People treat you a different way. You see yourself and think of yourself another way, and you sort of internalize that appearance subconsciously. Could be neuromuscular. You're moving there's a lot of nerves in the face. You're moving a lot of stuff around. There's going to be feedback to the brain that's going to be changed from that. But in any case, you see that in a lot of these cases, you see that people will tend to kind of over time, gradually their personality will shift more to the new face they get. And, there's some examples where this is kind of good. There's some clients where I do recommend something like double jaw surgery if it seems like they had an issue where they should have been choleric, but they're more kind of recessed, melancholic. It's kind of obstructing their airways. And yes, double jaw surgery does great. But a lot of times you see with the Botox, freezing the face, getting rid of wrinkles, which, like I said, are generally seen as a good thing. They're signs of life experience and of skills and whatnot. And then, especially with the nose jobs, those are especially dangerous because, as I sort of alluded to when talking about my brother, whom I love, but he is the way he is, a little short upturned snub nose that everyone wants to get, that stands for impatience, impulsivity, reactivity. But the longer nose, which you see on the old Greek and Roman statues, was historically seen as a sign of beauty, very strong beauty standard, stood for patience, thoughtfulness, consideration. And so, yes, I do believe that it's sort of an as above, so below thing. You change one, you change the other. And so that's why I tell people to be cautious with the plastic surgery, with the facial adjustment, because you're changing a lot more than just, how you look on your Instagram. You're changing your whole self because it's all one holistic system.
That is amazing. I love that. And I kind of understood that from years ago with the face reader in California, the Chinese lady. I have a teardrop mole under my left eye. And I've actually had so many people say, you should get rid of that thing. It's a little beauty mark. And I've had it since I was very, very young and not born with it, but very young, a child. And she said, oh, no, 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 that's your compassion mole. Don't get rid of that. She said, you've got the thing in life to, become available for compassion. And if you take that out, you're going to change your destiny. I'm like, really? And I said, okay, I kept it all these years. Hmm. Well, I'll try to see if I can share Donald Trump for the scared boy, little boy vibe versus his warrior, archetype. Here, one more zoom in because you can see such a different person here. Those are not the
Yeah.
same person.
Yes, yes. That's you see this a lot with celebrities, people in power because going through life, you have to put on a mask, you have to put on a persona to get by. I mean, I was just analyzing, prepping future videos on Jim Carrey and Sydney Sweeney, and very different personalities, very different faces. Both have quite strong asymmetry. Sydney Sweeney, especially, she's an interesting one. She puts on a mask very much for the camera, and Donald Trump is no different. You got to think, politicians will often have asymmetry, but Donald Trump is at base a media man. I mean, he's a Gemini, he's a communicator. And so you can very much see that there's a lot of thought and calculation put into how he presents himself. And you can see even back in 2016, 2017, that right side, very strong, very aggressive. This is the Trump that he wants the world to see. This is
Hmm.
his sort of conservative, rah, rah, fight, fight, fight sort of outer self. But then that left side, even if you don't see fear, I mean, there's pain, there's stress, there's sadness. He is just uh, pushing himself to the limit and punishing himself. And I I don't know what the exact diagnosis there would be of what he could do different or what's that root the cause of that. But you can very much see that contrast. Lots of hidden pain.
Yeah, and it's in the same way you composite photo the 25 portrait, so it hasn't changed. And it's just stark. It's quite stark. One guy looks like he's ready to go to battle, and he looks like a kind of like a falcon or something. And the other guy looks like, ah, get me out of here. What the hell? He looks
Yeah.
worried. He looks a little worried. He looks a little afraid. He looks a little sad in the other picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is a wonderful tool, even if we did it for our own lives and, smash together two sides of our face and ask our friends to analyze the two sides of us. And we could just have a party doing that with each other. So thank you for sharing that because I find that, now that he's kind of in charge and you pointed out he has a lot of adrenaline, need for adrenaline because of his crow's feet, you mentioned, someone who has that kind of command with his nasolabial folds mean you can be in command. We all want to put filler in our command folds, right? And these are the
Hmm.
lines that everyone's so afraid of. We need them to be a more commanding presence, according to you. He's got a skeptical chin and narrow, small lips, which make him eyes, which make him cynical. So you've got some interesting characteristics that are probably true of him: skeptical, cynical, commanding, needs adrenaline. And you also made a beautiful comment that almost touched my heart. That underneath all of that, as you read his face, he's got this weak sense of self that seems to come from face reading, kind of like I need to fit in or I want to fit in.
Mm.
That like needs to be approved of, maybe.
Yes, yes. This lip, it's coming out, this photo it's coming out a little more. He's got a thin lower lip. Um so lower lip stands for introspection, sense of self, internal communication. Upper lip is external communication. And so I was speaking a little bit from experience with that because the numbers are about 80% of people have a fuller lower lip than upper lip. I'm one of that 20% with a very thin lower lip, and I have to be honest, sort of a weak sense of self and poor emotional communication. I'm married and I work on that with my wife, and she's a great help with that. Moon face, very good with emotions and moods and whatnot. But, by default, I don't feel super strongly about things. And the thing I've heard about Donald Trump from media sources and from friends I have who work as lobbyists or political people and have been in the White House is that the old joke is that Donald Trump believes whatever. Hmm? Donald Trump believes whatever the last person told him, and that's his view on something, is just whoever spoke to him last.
Yeah. I can see that being true because it seems that's what is happening most of the time, right? So whoever has his ear, the last person in his ear is the person I guess he wants to receive approval from, like kind of floating through the approval process here. Okay, well, that's great. Let's move away from Trump. And that's fascinating. I think this is one of the best demonstration pictures you put out because I had screenshot other people. And I think I would like to talk a little bit now about Netanyahu, as you called him, the mob boss, because those two characters on our world stage are the main characters on our world stage. They are like taking up a lot of space, right, in our collective psyche. So can you tell us a little bit about his face changing? Because he was also a Mercury face, which you described as more sensitive and curious and more of the magician. And then he moved, of all things, into the Mars face.
Yeah, well, you see with Benjamin Netanyahu, at first he was more mercurial, which can be more of a more sensitive, more creative. But you got to remember, Mercury was also the god of thieves, and so it has a trickiness, a cleverness to it, which you see very much in Netanyahu. He has those mercurial arched eyebrows, and um, and so that stands for uh, needing to be in control, needing to be in charge, um, jealousness, wanting to be the best. Um, And so, that's he's probably the strongest example I've ever seen of that. Um, and so over time, you see that he sort of transitioned from maybe this more clever role to a more aggressive, assertive role as he sort of come into his own as a politician. Very strong Mars face, some Jupiter elements as well, which you see when he talks sort of in more religious language about Amalek and all this Old Testament stuff, where there's very strong self-righteousness, strong need for inner conviction. And I
Is
think,
there, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when you
Go
talk
ahead.
about Mercury as clever and trickstery and thievy, and that is the downside or shadow, but what again are some of the more positive mercurial features that he would have entertained as a younger man?
Yeah, well, he would have been a great communicator, right? That the main thing with Mercury is communication. They are great actors, comedians, and musicians. Very, very creative, very quick in the mind. Mercury is all about speed and wit, charm, charisma, creativity. He would have been great with that. Great talker. I imagine he probably would have been a very enjoyable guy to have over for company. And I'm sure he's kept some of those traits over the years, but now he has more of an assertive Martian thing.
So he's acting like a warrior.
Yeah.
Quite a warrior, actually. And so, as he shifted more into the warrior mode, and he has that more of intensity. You know, if you're on his good side, he might love you to death, and if you're on his bad side, he might want to kill you, as I think you said in the
Hmm.
video. I found that the thing about his nose was interesting. You pointed out that his nose type of nose is really a long game, long strategy nose. Like he's looking at the
Mm.
long arc of time. Is that something that's common with people with Mars faces? Is a nose like there's a nose story, a lip story, an eyebrow story? Like I love the eyebrows because those archy eyebrows like that.
Hmm.
Erika Kirk has
Yes.
those, and you said jealous and controlling, right? And
Yes.
okay, so is that true that like he's got this Mars face that's shifted through life circumstances to move into archetypal warrior mode, but then this
Hmm.
nose is like very strategic and long planning? Is that the idea? So that just amplifies how he acts as a warrior?
Yeah, so this is why I like to give the analogy of the painting. You've got the canvas, you've got the main colors, the broad strokes, and then the little details. And so each one sort of modifies it a little bit, right? You're doing a painting, you paint a tree, but then you add on there's a bird in it, so that's it's modified. How you feel about it, how you look at it is a little bit different. So it is with the facial features. So his underlying thing, choleric, maybe a little bit of phlegmatic now. So that's his main picture, but then you modify it. So, okay, if he's Mars, then he's going to lean into more of the aggressive, controlling part of choleric. But then, okay, he's got a longer nose, so that's going to sort of play down the impulsivity and impatience of the Mars face, make him a little more strategic. So you see, as you sort of go up the ladder from more general to more specific features and personality traits, you get a more sort of full view of a person where a Mars face, it's sort of the general outline. I mean, it's based on the actual outline of the face, but you have a lot of different variations on that. You could have a more, snub-nosed, impulsive Martian who's maybe more of like, we could say the ground troop, but then you have more like Netanyahu, the long-nosed Martian, which is more of we call it the general type, more of the planner.
Right. And so we don't want to do nose jobs if we have a good nose, right? We're going to lose that trait that we really want. It's like, well, yeah, I know. I used to be a good long-term planner. You know, it's interesting. In astrology, he's a Sag rising at 9 degrees, and it's really also baked in the archetype of the warrior. Even if he was so mercurial in the beginning, is truly in his destiny because there's a star on top of his ascendant, or his ascendant is backed up by the star Antares, which is a war star. And people
Mm.
often think of Sagittarius as kind of happy-go-lucky, traveling, faith of adventure or something like that. The centaur, half man, half human. But no, it's actually a war sign as well.
Mm.
Has to do with archery and bows and flying, kinetic devices. And astrology is uncanny. There's an asteroid called Hephaestus on his midheaven, which is the armorer of the gods, the guy who made the thunderbolts for Zeus. And so then he calls a war iron swords, but it literally is flying projectiles or drones or whatever else is going through the air to cause harm. So we were living in a cartoonish life. I'm going to show you guys what this other face of Netanyahu looks like, the friendlier one, which is completely a different story than what we normally see. So this is his other side, his hidden side, would you call it, or his private side?
I believe that this is his, I think that this is his right side, his
Yeah,
personal side,
this is his
because you can see
personal side.
it's very aggressive, very wide splayed ears, very independent, very strong rectangular shape there. But you can see it bulges out at the jaw a little broader at the jaw than it is at the forehead. That's a sign of a Jupiter face. Jupiter people are going to be very interested in justice, right and wrong. They can be a little self-righteous. Jupiter face people are naturally attracted to the judiciary and the pulpit. I work at a cafe sometimes, which is right between all the churches, and so all the
Mhm.
priests and pastors meet there, and they all have the Jupiter face. It's like, and they all have the big beard too, so they all look
Wow.
like an image
Really?
of Zeus or Jupiter.
Well, that's
Um,
funny because Erika Kirk, who, the Lord is
mhm.
just, whatever. She's always doing the preaching.
Yeah,
Erika Kirk has the Jupiter face.
she does. Yes, she's also a sort of Mars Jupiter mix, much like Netanyahu. So a very intense, strong combination. But yeah,
And
the
with
the
the eyebrow. She's got the pointy eyebrows.
yes, the arched eyebrows too. So, and the last thing I'll say with him, you can pick out a few other things. You got, the command creases. You can see, actually kind of the difference in mood here, right? Where on the photo on our left, you can see that he's a lot more tired. He probably had a long day when he had this photo taken. But the other side, he's a lot more um, pleased, sort of happy. Um, but then the last thing I want to point out is the very thin upper lip. So I mentioned
Mhm.
the lower lip stands for internal communication, upper lip stands for external communication, communication with other people, relationship with the outside world. People with a very thin upper lip are going to be naturally distrusting and very hesitant to say what they really think and feel deep down. They're going to be very calculating in how they speak.
And his ears are huge too. You mentioned that in your.
Yes. Highly independent, extremely, and because remember these are composites from his right side, this is going to be in his professional life. So this is professional independence. And you see in Israeli politics, he really is kind of this once in a generation FDR type figure where he's sort of leading the way himself in all these policies.
Yeah, and part of what you said about the Jove thing, Jovian faces being connected to, you said religious people, priests and stuff like that. You know, a little known story that was surfacing during the beginning of the war in Gaza that has been buried, probably erased from the internet, was the old Chabad rabbi in Brooklyn that died, who created the whole movement. Had met him as a young man after, his post-warrior days when he was an Israeli soldier. Netanyahu had met him in Brooklyn, and he had decreed to Netanyahu that you will be the one to bring the Messiah back, and you are
Mm.
going to be a great leader, and it's all on your shoulders, dude. So you wonder how that young mercurial faced man, eventually that seed was planted, that it is his role to bring back the Jewish Messiah, and that's what he's here for, right? They could have really landed for him.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's fascinating
That
to
story
know.
got buried, and if you try to Google it, I don't think you're going to even find it anymore. So it came out early in the Gaza war, and it disappeared.
Wow.
Probably still diggable, good way back machining. So we have this kind of face, and we have a Sag rising on a war star, so and midheaven on a armor of the gods. And I just find that with this kind of like the way you're describing his face has got the religious component to it. One of the things you declared that I think is very useful is that you think he believes that it's really his divine birthright to do what he's doing.
Yes, yes. I think because and that's based a lot on that sort of the determination in the eyes, but also the Jupiter face shape plays a big part in it. I see conviction. I think that he believes what he's doing is right.
Yeah, and I think it's true. I think he took on a mission as a young man from the Brooklyn rabbi guy, and he's on a mission, and he's got a constitution where he seems to be able to pull off, a kind of, you called it mafia boss way of being in his leadership style. We're just going to briefly look at Erika Kirk. We already talked about her eyebrows. We talked about her face structure being also, we alluded to it, Jovi, and I'll show you guys a picture of her composite face. And then we're going to talk about, the next thing, which is JD Vance, because in our world, it's quite obvious that at some point, maybe astrologically, it says that Donald Trump won't finish his term. Astrologically, it suggests that JD Vance, also a Leo rising, may be in power in the Oval just by ascension to that spot before the next election in 2028. So it's worth looking at his trajectory as well. It's funny that Erika and JD Vance also have their own story from the infamous, hug that they did together, and that they're famous for that scandal on the stage. So this
Yes.
is this is the two faces of Erika in the composite form. Would you address that for us?
Yes, yes. I believe this is her I think this is her right side, but I'm not certain. Um
Oh, I remember you said that the one, like when we're looking at the screen, the one where she's really got a big smile, that's her left side face, and the super square one is her outer face, her right side.
yeah, yeah. So these are yeah, so this is her true inner private self we see there on the right. Um, we
Wait, wait, wait,
see.
wait. Let's make sure we got this right. So she has a big smile and she looks happy,
Mhm.
and over here she looks square. I think it was this one was her. Do you know? Because you put the. I'm just
I
grabbing.
so I have the photos here. These are two different ones of her left side. So this is both her inner private self.
Oh, these are two ways her inner private shows up. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is at two different periods of time. So you
Mhm.
have the one on the left is older. That was when she was a model. The one on the right was at a turning point event.
Thank you.
Um, and so you can see sort of, lighting and stuff changes a lot of stuff, which is why I like to use multiple images when making these composites. You can see, of course, a square Martian thing. It really comes out in that second photo. You see some Mars. You also see a little bit of fullness in the lower jaw and the cheeks right there. That's a bit more of that Jupiter thing. So you see a similar sort of combination. First photo shows it off really well, and you wonder if she's done something with her eyebrows or her makeup to try and sort of soften these features that are very strong, very pronounced, very dark eyebrows. You see there's some curvature there, which may have been plucking or whatever. Those are stereotypically feminine eyebrows, shows compassion, empathy, makes decision based on the consensus of other people, but there's still some arching in there. So some controllingness. The pretty high set stands for high standards. She needs to consider all the facts before making a final decision. And big teeth. This is one of the things that really stood out to me with her. Big smile, big teeth. Big teeth specifically stand for strong appetite, a desire to get what you want out of life, a sort of relentless pursuit of whatever it is. It's romance, right? If you're dating these people, they're going to be very forward. They're going to be very driven towards you if they like you, but also of power, money, influence. This is further emphasized by the fact that she's got a bit of a wider mouth. She's kind of controlling her smile in that other photo, in the more recent Turning Point stuff, not smiling as big as she could, but I think that's still there.
Well, you had a couple of interesting comments in your video. One is that Erika and her former husband Charlie would have probably not actually been, you said traditional marriage, rearranged marriage almost, because like a political marriage, because their temperaments are so similar by facial reading that they probably would not be complementary.
Yeah, it really stood out to me, and it's funny. I actually took my first notes on this and did a first video on this in September, shortly after he passed, when before all the stuff about her came out and before anyone started asking questions about her, and I noticed similar stuff, and I was like, that's odd, but yeah, I recorded the video and I actually screwed up the audio, so it was unusable. So I threw it away, and I was like, "Well, no one's going to be talking about Erika Kirk in a few months, so I'll just put it away." But people kept talking, so I made this video, and I was like, "You know what? I'll um, just reuse the script, maybe take a few more notes. There are more pictures of her now." But that is something I noticed very much is that normally you want complementarianism, you want if you have someone very intellectual, you want someone very practical. If you have someone very intense, you want someone very calming, soothing. If you got an introvert, you want an extrovert, something like that. They're both very intense, driven people. They both have kind of a mix of sanguine and choleric traits, which sanguine is more, short-term runner, choleric is more long-term marathon runner, but they're both intense runners. They're both very intense, driven, aggressive people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really see, usually you'd see one who's maybe a little more melancholic, a little more phlegmatic, a little more calming, soothing. These people, you'd almost want to see them like in different relationships with other people because they're both the leaders of their respective relationships. So that was very interesting to me, but that I noticed that just very strong driven features on both of them, and a lot of them kind of similar.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that she has that sanguine forehead, which you said, was it sanguine? What was it that you said people, I'm going to make a joke about what it was. Yeah. What, or it's a Jovian face. You were saying like, there's a sense of everyone grieves differently. The cliche, that's going to go, that should be a t-shirt. Everyone grieves differently. But how she seems to be laughing and jovial through her grieving. Is that her forehead or is that her Jovian face? What was it you were pointing
Yeah,
to?
I think it's sort of a combination of the two. So, Jupiter, in the French schools, they make correlations between the temperaments and the face shapes. This has been disputed by other face reading authors, but one of the things that I've noticed in doing client consultations, which I do a lot of for people, is that I see with a lot of Jupiter faces, both men and women, you'll see sort of a sanguine phlegmatic mix. You have this sort of phlegmatic durability and tolerance and ability to see the long term, strong religious conviction and vision, but this sanguine charisma and this sort of outgoing spirit. And when you combine that, sanguine and jovial. These are actually terms that were historically associated with physiognomy and astrology and whatnot, but have entered the lexicon. You read old books and they say, oh, so and so is sanguine. They're very happy and cheery, and they're jovial. They're very jolly. And so I think that, it's hard to say, right? If to judge from Erika Kirk's reaction is like, is this genuine? Is this a persona? Is this put on?
Yeah, I know
But
exactly. It is hard to say. It's almost like, well, there's two things I'd say about this because Erica, there's two things. If you're like not a face reader, like I'm not a face reader, and I look at Netanyahu's face, I just don't like someone who seems to have a really crooked mouth, right? I just react to crooked mouth people really a sort of a stroke. You had a stroke, fine. But if you have a crooked mouth from birth and it's slanted like this, it's talking out of the side of your mouth, I just don't trust you, right? So we have a sort of basic way that we seem to feel as human beings about people. And I think it's almost primal. I think it's mammalian. I think it's survival oriented. We can suss people out unless we've had an indoctrination of some kind about that person, right? That's why cults are formed. Anyone else can look at the cult leader and go, that guy's an asshole. But all the cult people are like in a trance, right? Hypnotized into adoration. There's a little of that going on with Erika. Like, so let's say 80% of non-Zionist, nationalist, Christian types who are super conservative and believe she's the grieving widow. That's a cohort, and that might be like, in the general public that on the bell curve, they're on the outlier. The average person looks at the behavior, mannerisms, and things that Erika's up to, like and we have a cringe factor. We have something goes in our alarm bells and goes, what's wrong with this story?
yeah, yeah, and that's there's just it's a lot of intensity, a lot of aggression, a lot of drive, and you can't see it in her face. You can't see that this is an inherent thing for her. So it kind of makes you wonder about her real motives, maybe. And that's one thing I like to clarify with face reading is that face reading physiognomy, it can't tell you there are a few limits. It can't tell you about intelligence generally. There's some signs, but you can't really tell IQ per se from it, and it can't tell you about moral character. So you can
Mm.
see tendencies, like maybe they have a tendency to be impulsive, aggressive, maybe a little tricky or mischievous, but whether they use those gifts for good or for evil, you have to really judge by the actions, by what they do, versus just what their character. No, I don't believe that anyone is inborn to be good or evil by nature. I think we all have moral choice, and it's just we're sort of dealt a certain hand, and it's how we use our gifts and our talents that matters.
Oh, brilliantly said. Same in astrology. One could have a very difficult Neptune story in their chart, and it could mean everything from, escapist addiction and, being duplicitous and deceptive, all the way through to being like, an enlightened being full of compassion and unconditional love. And same with Mars. Mars can be this noble firefighter rushing in to save somebody, and it can be a homicidal maniac. So we have this range of expression and faces, just like we do in astrology. And there's like literally, how will you express this energy? And that is where we have that inner fire of our spirit that is in the character, right? And playing this character. And that's where we have the latitude of choice. And, I do think that there is a strong destiny factor to astrology, just as there is a strong destiny or fated factor to our face. But if we have any free will or agency, it's in how we use this energy that we are coded for. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely, and I definitely agree with that. It's how we use it, for
It's how
sure.
we use it. And that's probably the only free will we really have is how do we use it? All right. So JD Vance is coming into ascendancy most likely before the end of Trump's term, according to astrology. If I'm wrong about that, I quit my astrology practice. Can you tell me a little bit about his face and what your observations are about the character and the metal of the man?
Yeah, yeah, I did a video. It was requested by a fan, him versus Gavin Newsom. That was the conversation at the time. People are like, well, these are going to be the guys in 28. And with JD Vance, there's a few trends going on here. The big picture is strong, steady, stubborn, um, reliable, steady. He's phlegmatic, pure phlegmatic. So you'll see he's a little more heavy set, a little huskier guy.
You said he's a little bit phlegmatic. And for our audience, what does that mean, phlegmatic? So they understand. I think of slow or slow moving. What does it mean for you?
Yes, well, if your people know astrology and by extension the sort of tradition of Western esotericism, symbolically phlegmatic, the phlegmatic temperament is connected with the bull and with water, with elemental water. So these people have the power of absorption, of endurance. The phlegmatic's best trait is that they can endure lots of stress. They can go through a lot of sort of hard situations and absorb a lot of stimulus and whatnot without it really getting to them too much. The downside, and this is associated also with water, is that they are slow. They have very strong momentum once they get going. It's hard to stop them, but it's also hard to start them. Once they get sort of stopped up or they aren't moving that much, they aren't doing much, then they get a bit more, they get very passive. So with I saw that with him, and that's interesting because you don't see that too much in politicians.
I
Sometimes you
was
see,
just, you must have read my mind. That was my next question. I said, it sounds like that's not a characteristic of most politicians. Maybe Jimmy Carter, he was so chill, but like,
yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
you see it when in older politicians, people get a little more phlegmatic as they age. That's another one of the aging things, like the Mars phase. People get a little more phlegmatic in the jawline, get a little heavier down here. That shows just sort of a calming of the energy. They get a little more relaxed, a little more durable, a little more able to endure stress. But with him, you have that, and you also have his face shape. There's a little bit of that Jupiter energy there, a little bit of conviction, a little bit of drive, but it's mostly Earth. It's a nice, even, square face shape. And so it's similar to Mars in that it is a little, pugnacious, direct, kind of feisty, but it's very grounded, very practical, not given for flights of fancy or big dreams. Yeah, you can see they're very square face. And you look at that, he's got kind of a shorter nose. I said he very much has a not to hate on the guy for being a hillbilly or whatever. My ancestors are hillbillies, but he does have more of a peasant sort of look, and that's not a bad thing, right? This guy would be an excellent farmer or welder or something practical, hands-on. Um, but the presidency, it's always seemed rather odd to me. And why is he here? Well, that gets into his other traits, which you see extremely deep set eyes and he's smiling, so they puff out a little more. But you see, he's generally got thinner lips when you see him in a sort of default facial pose.
mhm.
That those are both signs of being very calculating, withdrawn. He very much thinks before he speaks. He doesn't want to say anything without thinking about it beforehand and planning out what he's going to say. So I think that for whatever reason, I think he wants to be president. I think he's probably one of those guys who's always wanted to be president his whole life, and he's made a lot of calculated moves to get there. I remember hearing a story. He was a never Trumper. At first, he was anti-Trump, then
Mhm.
Trump won, and then in 2017, he had a meeting with them. Peter Thiel, David Frum, one of his political mentors, and a few other people. And then when after they walked out of that meeting, suddenly he became pro-Trump and he was like, "Well, I'm the Trump's guy now." And then Peter Thiel organized the meeting between him and Trump, and he was like, "Hey, Vance is a good guy, let him, endorse him for Senate." And then so he goes from writing a book to being a junior senator to being vice president to being president all out of nowhere.
Yeah,
Just
that's meteoric. But then you're also
yes.
talking about expediency. So are there characteristics in this type of face that you'll do what you need to do just to get where you have to go?
I would say that's very much inner thing. Pragmatism. I don't see much idealism. I think he is the kind of guy where I don't think he's the sort of man who's generally given to ideals generally, maybe to certain kind of practical moral convictions, but to sort of big dreams, big visions. I think he's much more of a pragmatist, can-do worker kind of guy. And so
Hmm.
so to editorialize a little bit, my personal suspicion is that he's maybe kind of acting on behalf of Peter Thiel or other actors, where he's sort of their man on the ground.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense to me. Is that kind of square looking face a Joe face, or is that leaning into because you got the beard? It's hard to say what's really going on, or is that more of a Martian face?
I call it mostly Earth Earth face, so
Mhm.
that's kind of between the two, but it's
Oh, you mean like we have a moon face, a Venus face, a Jupiter face, etc., and then we have an Earth face?
we do have an Earth. So you have the seven classical planets, you have faces for the outer planets, and then they round it out with 11 with an Earth face. Now,
Oh, that's so cool.
some systems they combine them, so they say that Earth and Mars are one face, just of different kind of varying lengths.
Hmm.
Um, my system, Morphopsychology, that I've studied, comes out of France. They split Earth off into its own face because when you see that very short square face, these people are very practical, very grounded. It's similar to Mars. They're both intense, aggressive sort of people, strong, stable, stubborn, but there's an added groundedness there. I see a little bit of Jupiter in the lower face, maybe more so on the right side, right? It's kind of coming out a little more there. The
Yeah,
forehead's a
I
little
can
bit
see that.
narrower.
Yeah, the right side is definitely coming out more.
So he
This
wants to
right.
present himself as this jolly, moral, righteous sort of person, this big personality. But you see on that left side, it's a little more earthy, just
Mm.
very, very square, very rectangular, um, very, very just stable and not really super idealistic, very practical.
It's funny. I love that way you're describing his Earth face because the more you say it, the more I see it. You know what I mean? I almost feel like he's a like a bull, like you know what I mean? The archetype
Yes.
of the bull on the farm. Yeah, it's very almost like I'm Canadian, so I'm not Republican or Democrat. But I remember when he was in the Oval Office on that big scene with Zelensky, and he spoke out, to say to Zelensky, something he called the elephant in the room. Like, you're not being grateful. You don't have all the cards in your hands or whatever he said. He just spoke it out. It was pretty direct. It was pretty neutrally direct. It wasn't angry. And I also saw him do that when the bombs were coming down, or Netanyahu did something. He was visiting Israel, and then Netanyahu did another, out of the box move, and he made a comment that was just, it wasn't angry and it wasn't even sarcastic. It was just like, hey, that's an asshole move, So
Mm.
he's got this kind of weird directness.
Yeah, yeah, it comes out when he was doing a Zoom interview for something and his dog started barking and he you know he forgets he's on a hot mic and he's like, ah, idiot. He gets mad at his dog. He's like, that damn dog is barking again. And having grown up around hillbillies or poor suburban kids or wherever he's from, I know that. I mean, that's sort of normal around there, but you see that um, sort of aggression and very direct, no nonsense attitude come
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. If you were looking for a politician that was your ideal, like, I mean, I liked Jimmy Carter from my Canadian standpoint, but he seemed to be unliked and ineffective, but he seemed like a decent human being. If you were looking for like archetypally phlegmatic or choleric or Mars or Jupiter for the facial structures that change and temperaments, is there anything that you'd say like our ideal female or male leader of the free world would be best suited to have like what, phlegmatic or a longer nose for the long game? Is there just kind of an archetype of the dream politician?
Yeah, there's it, and I'm working on a book about this right now, and I was just thinking of for each of the face shapes and temperaments, I'd love to have sections on certain jobs for each. So I want to talk about choleric actors, sanguine actors, melancholic, phlegmatic actors, because in any career, I think any of the temperaments can do it. Some are drawn to others more than others, but they do it in different ways. With leadership, you have sort of different leadership styles, but generally, I find that cholerics are the best at leaders. They're good in the long term. They aren't driven too much by emotion. Sanguines can be a little impulsive, impatient when in power. Bill Clinton leaned sanguine in a lot of ways. Joseph Stalin was a sanguine, um, very much just a practical, impulsive sort of person with his purges. And then face shape, I would say either Mars or Venus, right? And they're sort of opposites, right? You have the peacemaker versus the warrior, but there's sort of two paths you could take, I think. Venus, much more of the charismatic, well-spoken peacemaker, bringing people together, trying to sort of make deals, make peace. And then Mars face because just the aggression and drive needed to survive Jupiter faces, I would, maybe lean against actually, because I think with their moralism and self-righteousness, they might be driven to do kind of crazy things. Mars faces are at least a little more practical. They aren't so idealistic. They're like, listen, I have interest, you have interest, I want to fight for my interest, but we can maybe work it out. And I just say that because you look at world leaders, and this is why I don't analyze that many world leaders or politicians, because a lot of it is just like choleric Mars, choleric Mars, choleric Mars. You look at Putin, Erdogan, Hillary, Trump, whoever. Um, Mark Carney, actually, I talked about him a little bit on another show I did, and he has an asymmetry. He presents as Saturnian, this very sort of diligent, little detail-focused banker. But you look at his
Mm-hmm.
left side composite, he's pure Martian on there.
Oh my God,
But
that's
he's
amazing.
secretly very super. You look if you cut off the left side of his face and just look at that, the eye and the eyebrow and all that, it's super aggressive and driven. I would not want to get in that guy's way in the office or whatever.
Wow, that's so. The Canadian Prime Minister had a few kerfuffles during his campaign to win this election, and he kept getting in trouble for being like really curt, angry, and dismissive of female reporters in the questioning rooms as on the
Oh my
campaign
gosh.
trail. Yeah, and like he just loses shit, you know what I mean? And I mean, like just like and he'd be condescending to them, and it became a thing. It really was damaging his campaign. And I know all you Canadians listening who say he's a wonderful prime minister. I'm not saying he is or isn't. I'm just talking about what happened, right? But Saturnian, and like he's the banker guy, and then the other side, that's the public persona. You're saying but his composite for his hidden self is that more warrior archetype.
Yeah. So that would be what I'd say about politicians is that, I'd like a Venus-faced politician. Choleric Venus, you have some good examples of that with someone like Gandhi. But again, moral choice, right? A choleric Venus can be a great leader, but we look at sort of choleric Venus throughout history. Napoleon may have been that, I think. He doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
that traditional Martian face. Adolf Hitler, mostly choleric, pure Venus face shape. He wanted to be an artist, right? And he had very romanticized views on Germany and this and that. But the moral choice remains. So, right, just because you're a Venus face doesn't mean you're a
Yeah.
good person and a Mars face is a bad person. You can have great, we had George Patton, and he was a great Mars face. FDR, Mars face, Churchill. So again, at the end of the day, I like to emphasize you can tell the characteristics, the predispositions, the tendencies of people, but moral character, that's sort of between them and God.
That makes so much sense to me, the way you describe that. And, when I look at, astrology, it's the same thing. You have a sort of algorithmic code, a recipe of characteristics that show up in your chart. And then what are you going to use it for? It's like, here's the character's toolkit. What are you going to use those for?
Mm.
I think about the Venusian face. You said something about it. I was just going to finish up with that. And was oh, I know. It's like, okay, so I think Venusian face looks a little more like a pointy chin, right? More of
Hmm.
yeah. I don't remember what Acacia, what's that woman's name? Cortez, the one,
Alexandria
thank you.
Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes, I'm really not an American.
Yeah.
I have a feeling astrologically she's going places, believe it or not. But also Tulsi Gabbard would have gone places and she shot herself in the foot. And both of those women, I don't know what their faces are. We don't have to talk about that. But both of those women, I do think that we're going to have a female president next. That's weird, but that's the astrology. But both of those women could have worked it. And Tulsi kind of screwed up on her reputation through certain things that have happened. But I was going to say, we have a certain face type and then we age and we're going to find new stories coming in like Chinese face reading. You get these little pouches here called money bags. That's good for like,
Mm.
I'm a little old man or lady and I need to have some money in my life. I'm getting some too. I never had these money bags at all until I got money in my life. I've made a lot of money being an independent entrepreneur in the last 6 years. Now I've got money bags. Okay. What if I snatch away my money bags? Does that mean I lose my money bags? Yeah. Does that mean I might lose my money? So I think about the aging face and I think about how a lot of faces will begin to look more sort of saggy or it could move more into like a Martian disposition. And yeah, and so maybe we end up with politicians who look that way because no one's running for office when they're usually to be a president or a prime minister when they're 22. It's in the mid 40s onward that people begin to ascend to that level of
Mm.
public recognition and power. So we end up with a lot of square or longer faces because of age. That seems like that's why we end up with politicians like that. And JFK, is he a Jupiter? Kind of a big face.
He had a big head because he was Irish. That's you listen to Irish people, they talk about, oh, I can go through the airport, pick out the Irish people just from head size alone. Um, but I think he was mostly Venusian. I think if you look at the outline, big skull, strong features, but you had sort of that
Yes,
rounded
yes, yes,
taper
yes. You
on
did
the
have
jaw.
that. Yeah.
And I mean, it was him and another classic Venus, Marilyn Monroe. I mean, uh, they were together, and JFK was very much that lover boy type. You see that with Venus faces. Leonardo DiCaprio, another Irish descent kid. I think he's
Oh,
part Irish, part Italian, but classic Venus shape.
so the Venus shape, even in Trump, was younger, right? He had that more of a playboy
Yes.
vibe going. Yeah, that makes so much more sense. Well, I so enjoyed this conversation. I can't even say enough. And if people want to reach out to you in order to have a face reading on your website, I see you have various packages. And of course, I'll put your channel link here as well so people can follow up and watch your channel, which is just, as I said, binge worthy. Make sure you have popcorn. But I would love to make people know that you do individual consultations and you have various types of packages. And my daughter, who's turning 27, I had bought her a package. She's finally going to get her pictures ready for you. Side view, because what you also point out is profile has meaning as well as
Hmm.
everything else. And so I'm delighted with your work, Taylor. And also the way you present your content on YouTube is so entertaining, but also you keep it neutral enough, you know what I mean, and controversial people that it's worth listening to you and also not being triggered by your results. People can get through it even if they are steadfast, taking sides in their real life.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean I like it, and I like having the diversity of stuff. I have a Discord where I have my Patreon, which is my Physiognomy Academy. Talk about all my stuff there, teach everything from start to finish there. And the members there, they join a Discord, and we have everyone. We have Africans, Eastern Western Europeans, Latin Americans. We have two of our most active members are an Israeli and an Arab, actually. So we've got both sides of it. We've got Persians, we've got Chinese, everyone.
Is your
And
Patreon community for like something like early access ad free, or is that where you're teaching?
that's teaching. So the Patreon it's separate videos. Sometimes I put previews up for them on YouTube, but I'm trying to make it a full lecture course. And then the Discord is just for, the people who are subscribed to that Patreon to just kind of be able to, like, a hotline for me, like ask me like, what's this face shape? And they've gotten so good at it actually at this point that it's sort of got its own momentum. I've got
Oh my
um
gosh,
some
good.
pretty genius self-made face readers in my community. So it's
That's
it's pretty
amazing. I
fun.
love that. Same with my Patreon community. It's just for teaching, really. It's what I do over there. The name of your website, because I'm going to add it in the link, but I can't remember if you use ProSopa or your name.
ProSopaInsights.com.
Okay,
That is me on
ProSopaInsights.com.
everything is ProSopa Insights. Just put that in the search bar and you can find me.
What does ProSopa, ProSopa, which is your channel, which is your website, Insights, what does ProSopa mean?
ProSopa is the plural. It means faces in Greek. Face in
Uh,
Greek, prosopon. So I'm just sort of picked that because it sounded nice and it does have meaning. So
Okay, wonderful. It's easy to spell ProSopa, the way it sounds if you know
mhm.
how to phonetically, spell from hearing. Well, it was
Yep.
a pleasure. I'm going to just pause. I'm going to stop our recording and then I'll say goodbye privately. So
All
thank you
right.
so much. Everyone, please check out his channel, check out his classes and Patreon community, and certainly get a reading if you're into it, because I think you'll be amazed. Okay, thank you so much, Taylor.
All right. Thank you.
Lunatic astrology.